Hello, everyone. Ladislas Maurice from the wanderinginvestor.com. So today I'm really excited to be talking with Lobo about a unique report that he just published on nickel. Lobo, how are you?
I am well, Ladislas. Good to be back with you. And I really appreciate you asking about this because I think it's really important, even for people who don't particularly care about nickel, aren't invested in nickel. It connects to our whole industry. And I'm really glad to have this chance to talk about it.
I agree, and I really see this as a mental exercise because when we take a step back and we listen to the whole narrative, what we hear is we have the green revolution coming. We're going to have electric vehicles. We're going to need a whole lot of nickel, 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 and all of these batteries. And there just isn't enough nickel on that's being produced, essentially. So that's the general narrative that we're hearing whenever we're reading commodities reports or we're watching CEOs of nickel companies coming talking on shows, or when we read, Bloomberg or whatever. There's an issue with nickel supply. So that's the narrative. But you actually dug deep with your team of analysts and came with a very different viewpoint. And I think that's very interesting, not just because of the nickel case, but generally in investing, there's often a narrative out there that people don't really question. But it's very important as an investor to actually dig into the numbers and to do your own research, essentially. So, Lobo, you do not believe that there is an issue with nickel supply. Can you elaborate on your thesis?
Well, there is an issue. There are several issues, but I don't think we're going to run out of nickel. So that's the specific claim that I'm looking to debunk here. And to briefly explain, I mean, the report is there. It is a free download you can get. I think it's pinned to the free reports section of our website.
There's a link below.
Okay, but there's a couple key points to remember. One is nickel is a critical component for most of the lithium-ion batteries that we use now. The so-called NMC chemistry is the predominant chemistry in the lithium-ion batteries. And whether we think that ESG is a load of nonsense or it's the most wonderful thing, whether we think that everybody should be driving electric cars or not, that is the trend. That is real. And that does add demand for nickel above and beyond its regular industrial use. Remember, this is a primary industrial metal used in making stainless steel and many other things. So I'm not anti-nickel in any way. I'm not even saying that nickel is not seeing increased demand and will likely see increasing demand over the years ahead. The question, though, is there enough nickel? And what does that mean for prices, therefore, and for us as investors or speculators in this space? Do I want to buy nickel stocks because we're going to run out of nickel and nickel's going to go to the moon? And this is a particularly, this may seem abstract but it's not. We just saw nickel prices go absolutely insane this year on the LME. They had to shut down trading. They shut down the LME for the better part of a week because of a nickel short squeeze. So this is really specific and happening now in our marketplace. So other important thing to understand is that there's different kinds of nickel. And when the company CEOs are out there saying, oh, there's not enough nickel, we're going to run out of nickel, there's just not enough nickel, they're talking about the so-called class 1 nickel, the sort of more pure form that's more battery ready, which is what's traded on the LME. That's not the only kind of nickel. There's nickel pig iron, there are intermediates, there's lots of nickel in the world. And yes, you have to do work on this other nickel before you can use it in your batteries. But that doesn't mean there's no nickel. And without getting too deep in the weeds, the key point, there are two key variables, I think, here on this. This is a raging debate, and the nickel bulls will admit everything that I've said. But they'll say, this is the best chemistry, the nickel, the NMC batteries are the best, and we have to have this class 1 nickel for it. Well, you don't. And the reality is that Tesla, it's only one company, but it's a leading company in the space, is already directly contracting with suppliers of intermediates, non-class 1 nickel. So it's simply not true that you can only use this class 1 nickel. And other suppliers or OEMs are looking in this direction too. And the other key point is that there's another battery chemistry, the LFP, which doesn't use any nickel at all. It's a lithium iron phosphate, whatever battery. I forget what the P is, and I don't want to get I don't want to get my chemistry wrong. But remember LFP. Google the LFP. That is an alternative that has no nickel in it, and this is well known. They've been around for a while, and the argument from the nickel bulls is, yeah, but the LFP batteries don't have the same range. The NMC, the nickel lithium ion batteries, have a longer range. That is true, or has been true, but the advances in this space have been improving the performance of the LFP batteries so that they are catching up in range now. And the other thing is that they charge faster. The LFP batteries charge faster. They're much cheaper. They're less prone to catching fire. The heat issues that NMC batteries, these spectacular, fires that you see of Teslas or buses with electric batteries, and the fire department can't put it out, right? That's specific to the NMC chemistry that is much less of an issue for the LFP batteries. So except for the range up till now, I would actually say that the LFP batteries have been better. And now the range issue is being addressed. And, most people, whether the car can go 400 miles or 500 miles on a charge, they don't really care. They're worried about 100 miles. But hundreds of miles, it really doesn't matter. Okay, one last thing here, and then whatever questions you have.
So to recap, essentially, when people talk about nickel, they're talking about Class A nickel. But in reality, there's this whole subset of other nickels that increasingly are being used as substitutes for the Class A nickel that everyone talks about. And then there's a completely different sort of battery that people used to dismiss in the past, LFPs, that are gradually gaining market share versus the nickel batteries. So it's Class A nickel, the one that people typically speculate on, the one that miners typically go for, is essentially being attacked from two angles. And actually taking a step back, EVs only account for, I was looking at this graph that you published, for only 6 or 7% of nickel demand, and the rest for now is still mostly steel.
Right. Well, to that last point quickly, I actually don't make too much of that because prices are determined at the margin. So the fact that nickel into the EV batteries is still a very small piece of the pie, I could just say, oh, so it's not important, but that wouldn't be true. Because if the rest of the pie is basically the same or growing, and then you add 6% on top of that, or 9% or 11% or whatever it grows, that wedge of the pie, that's material. You're adding marginal demand, and that does push prices.
Cool. But so if we take a step back, if there's a big recession in China, for example, and construction of new buildings just kind of stops, and of infrastructure or slows down dramatically, then no matter how much new Class A nickel is actually needed in new EVs, that would just get essentially absorbed by the loss of whatever is not being built in China, correct?
There was a major economic downturn, yes. Regular industrial demand for nickel could easily, undermine, or you could end up with flat, right, nickel demand, even with robust EV demand for nickel. So yes, it's all of that is so. There's one more key point though that I want to throw in there is like if this is all true, like why haven't people seen this, or why haven't LFPs caught on more, is a question I get a lot. Well, it turns out that there's a patent covering LFPs held by a Swiss consortium, and that is running out, I think, this year. It's in the near term at any rate. And there was a carve-out in that patent for Chinese manufacturers making batteries for use in China. So it's interesting that the LFPs have caught on much more in China, and Tesla is making cars with LFPs in China because there was a patent carve-out. And when that patent goes away, like it seems like consumers didn't want these LFPs. They chose the NMCs because they were a better technology. But that only seems that way. And when this intellectual property restriction comes off, I think we're going to see OEMs using a lot more LFPs in the US and Europe. And you have statements from companies like BMW and Volkswagen that all their introductory level cars are going to use LFP. So, and those are the ones that you're going to sell in larger volumes, presumably. So this is a big deal. This is something that's been, I think, overlooked until my team dug into it. There's one fellow in particular. His name is Sudarshan. He's a brilliant researcher, and he's the one that brought my attention to this patent issue. And I think that's a game changer. And meanwhile, we've been waiting for this patent to roll off, and the LFPs have been improving. Their performance now of the new generation of LFPs is almost on par with the average NMC. And I'm throwing a lot of acronyms around, but if people can remember, just remember that, the non-nickel lithium batteries have been discounted before because of range issues. That's going away. And on top of that, there's been this patent issue, and that's going away. So I think we're going to see a big change in the market here, and it's not bullish for nickel prices.
So what is it bullish for?
Well, iron's cheap, so putting more iron in your lithium battery isn't going to change much. It is bullish for lithium, I have to say. I haven't been a raging lithium bull. I've been resisting that because it's quite common. It's not rare. There's lithium all over the world. I mean, it's right up at the top of the periodic table. This is after hydrogen. This is right up there, right? So lots of lithium. Course, economic concentrations and so on. But I just thought, I have thought that the price has gotten ahead of something that's so common. But it has held up better than I thought. So actually, this is my next research project. My brilliant researcher is even now working on projecting lithium supply and demand going forward. But that has held up better than I expected in the face of abundant supply. So maybe that's bullish there. But actually, the other one would be copper. As this electrification story continues, as these better batteries come on and range anxiety goes away. And don't forget, the LFP batteries are cheaper. So for anybody that's been sort of, maybe I'd like to get an electric car, it would be nice, save the world. And it would save me on gas. Well, gas prices are up, but they're so expensive, right? That's been keeping a lot of people off of making that change. But if you can bring on significantly cheaper EVs, that offer them all these wonderful feel-good benefits and saves them at the gas pump, that's bullish for the whole space. And it consumes a lot more. It's going to be rare earths, copper for your windings, a lot of other things. And ultimately, I think uranium, because you got to charge these cars somewhere. And, it makes no sense to be charging your electric car with a coal-fired electric grid, or even so-called clean natural gas. It still puts carbon in the atmosphere. So at some point, cognitive dissonance should kick in here, and this should actually be another tailwind for uranium.
Cool, fascinating. Yeah, because when I hear people talking about nickel, often people say, "Oh, but Elon Musk was talking about nickel, how there's a shortage of nickel." But then actually, Tesla is the very example of why there's a bearish case for nickel, because one, they cut a deal with an intermediate nickel producer, and two, I think now 50% of cars that they produce are based on LFP technology rather than the nickel batteries.
Right. So that's exactly right. There's one critical chart in that free report. If you look, there's several different charts, but there's one that shows nickel supplies in solid spaces on the chart, and then demand scenarios. And instead of saying, I'm so smart, I know what's going to happen, here's the price forecast. I don't know. There's a range of possibilities here, depending on EV penetration into the market space and then which chemistry takes over. So instead of picking one or going with an average and saying, here's the number, which would of course be wrong, we put a range of outcomes. There is a number of lines on this chart. And what's striking about that is if you look at what you're just saying about how, if you take the Tesla current EV adoption rate, there's no nickel shortage. And if you look at the others adding on, you consider how the trend is going in that direction, then there's like, it's like not even a question. So, but if you take even the most conservative, very low LFP adoption rate, like just 25% LFPs, half of what Tesla's doing right now, you still have plenty of nickel right now. And maybe, 5-6 years from now, maybe there's a nickel shortage. But with the LFP batteries being cheaper, charging faster, less chemically dangerous, and with this patent issue rolling off now, I really think that is an unreasonably bearish case for the LFPs, and therefore an unreasonably bullish case for nickel.
Thank you, Lobo. And I think, again, this is an example of why it's important for people to look for independent research. It's just too easy to get caught up in a narrative. This whole Elon Musk nickel narrative, when you actually dig into it, is not bullish, but actually very bearish for nickel. And people somehow manage to spin it into a positive thing. So look, I really recommend people sign up to at least Lobo's free newsletter. There's a link below. I'm an affiliate. I pay for Lobo's services. I actually don't even get a discount for being an affiliate. We need to talk about that, Lobo, next time around. But it's very good quality research and also very affordable. And personally, I've been subscribed I've subscribed to your services for the last two years or so. And every year I renew because it's helped me. I'll put it this way. It's helped me avoid making mistakes. That's how I get the ROI on your newsletter. It's sometimes I'm looking at a stock, I'm interested, I do my own research, then I'm like, cool, let me go check what Lobo says about this stock, and then there's something I missed. So it's mostly about, saving, not making mistakes, expensive mistakes. So I definitely
Thanks for saying that. That's sort of a key takeaway for this session for the audience. Whether you ever hire me to be your due diligence guy, I had some guy on Twitter who was not angry. He was a nickel bull, and he quoted 2 sources, and both were CEOs for nickel companies. Yeah. And just think about that. Yeah. Of course, those sources are going to have, a certain way of looking at things. Just key takeaway, whatever sources you use, whether you rely on me or not, don't trust the people who have an interest in whatever it is that's being promoted. If a copper CEO was bullish on nickel, that would carry a lot more weight for me.
Yeah. I stopped listening to CEOs of mining companies actually completely whenever there's an interview, and when I don't listen, unless if I'm considering investing in it, or I'm already invested in the company just to get a feeling for the company and the CEO, but not for whatever he's going to be saying from a macro point of view. I just dismiss whatever mining CEOs say in terms of the macro situation. In terms of their own companies, I'll listen.
Absolutely.
But
silver miners, I don't care what they say about the price of silver. Gold miners, I don't care what they say. And it's nothing personal. Even the best of the guys, of course, they have to put the most positive view on things. They can't do otherwise. I don't blame them. I'm just saying, keep this in mind.
Yeah.
You need to find some source of information that isn't somebody that benefits financially from you coming away with the most positive impression possible.
Correct. Fantastic. Lobo, thank you. So people, there is a link below to the nickel report, and also a link below to sign up to Lobo's free newsletter. Lobo, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ladislas. Have a good one.
You can go to my website, thewanderinginvestor.com, and sign up to the private list. It's entirely free. This way you will be getting insider information as I travel around the world looking for opportunities. Lastly, feel free to follow me on Instagram at The Wandering Investor. I look forward to hearing from you.